Hello, and welcome to our ACEDS product showcase, 5 e-discovery features needed to thrive in today's e-discovery climate. My name is Mary Mack. I'm the Executive Director of ACEDS, the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists, and we'll be having a deep dive into a platform I had the pleasure of working with about 10 years ago, Ringtail. During the webinar, you may have some questions. If you'll type them into the lower area of the screen where it says Q&A, what we will do is we will save those questions towards the end so that we can make sure we cover everything that needs to be covered. And if we don't have time to get to your specific question, I'm sure that today's presenters would be very happy to talk with you offline. At the end of our webinar, you'll have an opportunity, if you choose, to contact our presenters and learn more about Ringtail and FTI. Without further ado, Jason?
Thanks, Mary. Before I get started, just wanted to provide some introductions on Ringtail and FTI, and then I'll personally introduce our speakers today. Ringtail is the e-discovery platform owned and utilized by FTI Consulting, a global consulting firm that, among other consulting practices, assists the world's leading corporations and law firms in solving critical data challenges, including e-discovery. We have about 4,600 employees worldwide. We were founded in 1982, and we are a public company. What's important to note, and what's kind of really great about Ringtail being part of this organization, is many of our people are on the front lines of data challenges, and specifically e-discovery, seeing emerging trends and emerging data sources, and we really factor that into our development of Ringtail. And we're continuously developing and deploying new features and functionality to combat a lot of these challenges. And you'll see that and see what that means as we move forward in today's webinar. So some personal introductions. My name is Jeff Brazelin. I am a product marketing manager with Ringtail and FTI, and I spend the bulk of my time spreading the good word about Ringtail, focusing on our existing customers and new users and really spreading the good word. Joining me today is David Robinson. David is a director with our solutions architecture team, and he works with prospects, customers, and Ringtail hosting partners to really help them figure out how to best integrate with Ringtail, how to best utilize Ringtail for their organization. If you are attending this webinar from Canada, you might be familiar with David. He spent a lot of time up there working with in the e-discovery world there, as well as really spreading the word of Ringtail up there and getting people more proficient with Ringtail.
Oh, so thanks for that introduction, Jeff.
Yeah. Great to have you.
Oh, and also, actually, let me give a plug for ACEDS as well. I'm actually taking a break today to give this webcast from studying diligently for the exam. I'm actually in the process of getting that CEDS, that Certified E-Discovery Specialist, and it's going through the process, and it's been a lot of fun. I think I was telling you earlier that you can be in this industry, as I have for quite a long time, or for the bulk of your career, and tend to stay in one area of it, and so it's been really great to go through the virtual trainings and the webcasts and the printed materials to step back and get a grip on what everybody's perspective is in the process rather than just speculating.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Walking the walk. Yeah. Okay. Well, so the way that today's format's going to work is I'm going to start with some industry data to talk about the climate of e-discovery currently. And then I'm going to introduce the 5 features that we really feel at Ringtail are vital to survive and thrive in today's e-discovery climate. And I'm going to walk you through those features and functionality at a high level, kind of the value proposition, how they work, kind of the basics. And then I'm going to hand it over to David, who's going to take us live into Ringtail and show them up close and personal. So with that in mind, when we talk about the e-discovery climate, there's a lot of challenges with e-discovery, and a lot of it stems from the data itself. It's probably no surprise to anybody here to understand that data volumes are growing. One measurement had it at 40 to 60% year over year for corporate data. And storing this data is expensive. There's probably some downward pricing on actual data storage right now. One of them had it pegged at $3,212 for a terabyte of data. But when you think about data growing and how that can compound, it's quite a bit. And reviewing data is expensive. And the more the data grows, the more expensive it becomes. So where is this growth coming from? What's driving it? And where is it going? So the size of the digital universe in December 2012 was estimated at 2,837 exabytes. The estimated size of the digital universe by 2020, 40,000 exabytes. That's about 5,200 gigabytes per person on the planet. So it's growing. And it's probably no surprise to anybody here that a lot of it is being driven by connected devices, mobile devices, computers, tablets, etc. The number of text messages sent each year or each month in 2014 were 561 billion. The number of emails sent daily in 2016 were 210 billion. And we talk about emerging different data types. As new devices emerge, new data types emerge. As devices connect to each other, data starts to flow, and the floodgates open, and there's more data, right? So internet video surveillance. Think about the Nest cameras that people are putting in their homes, or Ring cameras on their doorsteps to make sure packages aren't being stolen. All that data has the option of being recorded, and it's nearly doubled. In 2015, 272 petabytes per month at the end of 2014. To 516 petabytes per month in 2015. And when we talk about the flow of this data, the Internet of Things will cause machine-to-machine connections to grow 250% from 4.9 billion in 2015 to 12.2 billion in 2020. So quite a bit. And as we talked about this, API connections, just really this flow of data just starts to continue to compound. So one of the things that's important for us at Ringtail is making sure we have a good understanding of not only the market and the trends, but specifically what our users and the general market wants, right? So everybody, I think, is well aware of these things occurring, but what are they looking for to combat this? So we partnered with a company called EMC Research to poll a number of legal professionals and government agencies and law firms and corporations to identify really what they value in an e-discovery platform. What are they looking for to make their lives easier? 75% of legal professionals say an e-discovery platform's ability to handle large data volumes is extremely important. 59% of legal professionals say it's extremely important that e-discovery platforms include advanced analytics and predictive coding. 87% of legal professionals say it's extremely important that e-discovery platforms be easy to use. I'm just going to pause here for a second when we think about this. So yes, there's a lot of data volumes out there. It's critical that a platform be able to scale, right? 75% of our legal professionals we polled say this. They also, a good portion of them say it's extremely important that it has some of these advanced features and functionality, with the understanding that as data volumes grow and things become more complex, leaning on the technology is going to make things efficient, allow users to work smarter, not harder. But what's really important to note, and this is something we try to really emphasize, is that it needs to be easy to use. You can have all the firepower and all the horsepower, but if it's not easy to use, it's not as valuable. So really kind of being customer-centric, really making sure that it's easy to get started with, easy to deploy, et cetera. So that's a point that shouldn't be diminished, and it's something that we really focus on here. And then the upshot of this is 41% of legal professionals say it's extremely important that e-discovery platforms be accessible via the cloud. It's kind of an interesting thing, lower than some of the other data points here. Obviously, there's a lot of noise about the cloud, a lot of data moving to the cloud, but not everybody's ready to do it, right? And so it's important that a platform be flexible, offer the ability for users to host on-premise, but also have the ability to transition on their own time to the cloud if and when they're ready. So, given these pain points, exploding data volumes, increasing costs, continual evolution of data types and sources, what is needed? So generically, when we think about some of these buckets of features and functionality fall into, data-specific solutions, technology-assisted review like predictive coding and continuous active learning, visual analytics for early case assessment and advanced data analysis, responsive coding templates to really streamline the review process, and native file viewing to be able to unlock key data sources. So I'll think of this, and this is how we look at it, right? So it's summertime right now, and I don't know about everybody on the webinar, but I do a lot of hiking. I like to get out there, and sometimes you go on a day hike, but you need to prepare as if maybe it'll be an overnight hike, and so you need to have things in your survival kit to make sure that you can survive and thrive out there in the deep woods. And similarly for e-discovery, into the climate we just described, these are kind of the 5 features that we've built directly in Ringtail for our users for today's climate. So with regards to data-specific solutions, we talk about chat discovery. This is just an example, but it's really important to note of really creating solutions that solve reviewing data from specific sources and make it efficient. And we'll talk more and show you what that means. Continuous active learning. This is an approach to technology-assisted review that's easy to deploy and scalable, which we think is important. Visual analytics, and our version of analytics is a document mapper. Conditional coding, and native file viewer. So I'm going to dive in here and show you those before handing it over to David live in the Ringtail environment.
Well, thanks, Jeff. It's funny, as you were talking about your hiking up in the woods, I was actually, you're in Seattle and I'm in New York City, so I tend to think of a hiking as a daily activity. I think there was one time I counted about 200 stairs and at least a mile that I occupy on my trip to and from work, just from Brooklyn to downtown, just to Times Square.
You probably still need a survival kit, right?
Well, I mean, more so, once you leave your house for the day, you got to have everything that you need with you to get you through the rest of the day.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so data specific. So there's obviously, as we stated, there's a lot of data platforms, devices, and types that are continually emerging. I mean, we've seen Office 365. There's different types of social media. If it's not Snap, it's Slack. There's always things coming up, and it's really hard to stay ahead of the curve. So it's important that not only the platform that is utilized have solutions specifically for data types, but more just because an organizational philosophy is committed to staying ahead of the curve in terms of how they continuously deploy, and that's something we do at Ringtail. I think we're shipping a new version of Ringtail every week to our users, specifically on the SaaS version.
Do you think that's intimidating, Jeff, or is that helpful?
Well, I think people have the option to accept, and I think it can be quite powerful. And a lot of these are just continual improvement, continual optimization.
Right. It's sort of the way that we get our phones updated. I think it's the metaphor that we hear most often, which is, rather than having to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, I can incrementally pick up just a few key features and then really ramp up on one major one rather than, law firms. And sometimes the upgrades only happen like once or twice a year.
Yeah, it's important. And that's the flexibility we talk about, is making sure that people can engage with the platform in the way that they want to and works best for their organization. And so those are certainly options as well. So in talking about chat data, one of the things to focus on here is what we focused on is Bloomberg chat, right, which is really important in financial industries, but it's also important overall as we think about workforces being more remote, using more communication online. Chat is a really prevalent tool, and data within chat is really hard to understand. And so when we think about Bloomberg, that's so critical to the financial industry, that's something that we've ran into, and so we've created a solution specifically for that. And if you've ever dealt
hard to read and hard to understand.
Correct. And if you've ever dealt with chat strings, you'll see here this is what it looks like in its raw form. Like, this is really hard to wade through, right? It's muddled, it's complicated. It's hard to kind of make heads or tails of what's there and follow along. And so what we've done is really committed to making it easy to understand. And this is what a chat string looks like directly in Ringtail and how we organize it. It's very easy to follow along and see who said what and when. You can see who entered the conversation. You can even select and highlight specific passages of what people said. And so that's what we talk about with data specific, right? It's really important that not just being able to look at the metadata, but being able to look in a way that makes sense, right, in a way that's efficient. And when we think about the costs associated with review and people's time, being able to do it in a way that allows people to work smarter. And this is a key example here. So David will show us this in a little bit. The next thing I'm going to talk about is continuous active learning, and this is an example of technology-assisted review that's easy to deploy. So some people here may be familiar with it, may not be familiar with it, but with directly in Ringtail, we've really committed to make it something that's very easy to deploy, really with just a few mouse clicks, and you'll see that. But when we talk about continuous active learning, what really kind of sets it apart from other forms of technology-assisted review is that it relies on the decisions of the reviewers to train the model, where what we'll call model-based relies on an expert to train the model. An initial set of documents are coded and used to train the review model. So then in this case, Ringtail prioritizes the document set and feeds the review teams the documents that are most likely of highest relevance, meeting predetermined precision and recall standards. Reviewers then review and code the documents, and those reviewed documents are fed back into Ringtail to fine-tune the review model, and the process continues. It's kind of like crowdsourcing, and it's kind of the law of large numbers. You're spreading out the review over a number of people and those decisions, and kind of the cream rises at the top, and the process continues and continues. And so for those that are kind of, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just, I think that there's some terminology around this. I know that this all falls under the auspices or under the umbrella of predictive coding, but I know that there's also terminology like unsupervised versus supervised learning or technology-assisted review, and so this all falls in the category of how would you differentiate this from, say, some of the other analytics in Ringtail?
Right. Yeah, no, so yeah. So technology-assisted review is obviously a big deal right now. There's a lot of talk about intelligent functionality, and this certainly falls into this bucket. And I think what's interesting about this is you're seeing this intersection of people and technology, kind of making the features work and partnering with the technology. And that's kind of Cal, right? Because you're leaning on the human beings to across numerous people to train that model. And so when people are thinking about using Cal, these are the things that really should factor in. If people prefer to rely on reviewers to train the model or lack the resources to rely on an expert to train the model, that's pretty important. The other thing that's important to note is that you can really start continuous active learning at any point in time. You don't need to have all your documents set because you can introduce documents at any point in time. So that's pretty powerful. If you think there might be documents coming in at a later point, you can get started. With model-based, you have to introduce documents. If you introduce new documents, you have to retrain the model. The other part that's important to note is maybe you don't want to share a training set with opposing counsel because there's no training set. There's nothing to share. And it's kind of workflow simplicity or the flexibility of model-based. And I think model-based, what's interesting about model-based is that, and some of the benefits of it is there's a very clear predetermined point. There's a clear endpoint of when a review concludes. And with continuous active learning, it's a little bit harder to gauge that. So estimating time, estimating completion dates, a little bit more challenging, but obviously here easier to get going.
It's like a bit of a trade-off. In the sense that there's a lower barrier to entry here is what I'm hearing from you. And just in the sense that, for people who want to try a flavor of predictive coding but without committing all the resources and time, they may get, it may be more situationally better for them, but certainly like an easier option to just try.
Yeah, correct. That's exactly it, right? The barriers to entry are quite lower with Cal. I think in some ways can be because there's not the expert involved. There's kind of one person training it. There's kind of less barriers and less pressure in that regard.
Yeah, I'm also struck by the third point there, which had to do with exchanging training sets. I know I was talking to one of our larger Ringtail user-based customers yesterday, and she was saying that one of the things that she appreciates about this, and this is certainly just a conversation. This is not saying that this is necessarily how you would go with it, but she said that it actually facilitates predictive coding without having to negotiate with the other side. Because I have heard practitioners and lawyers say, we're really eager to try this, but it's a little bit murky for us in terms of what we have to disclose in terms of using it and what we might have to share if we go down that path. Whereas with continuous active learning, they don't feel like there's that level of they don't have that level of commitment or that level of a need to actually disclose to the opposing party.
Yeah, I have heard feedback with regards to Cal that it often removes kind of the intimidation factor associated with predictive coding. I think that's kind of what you're kind of highlighting there. It's more approachable in some ways.
Right, from a functional point of view, but also perhaps from a procedural or process point of view as well.
Right. Exactly. So visual analytics, document mapper. Document mapper is kind of really a core feature in Ringtail. It's pretty unique, and it's a very powerful tool for our users that leverage it. And a lot of our users love it and live in it, and you'll see why here. So what we like to say is it's eDiscovery's most engaging visual analytics, but really at a high level, this notion that a picture says 1,000 words. You are able to very quickly get a global view of your data to develop on the onset an understanding of key facts, documents, and case themes to make teams more productive. This allows you to build stronger case strategies from the onset, even prior to a review. So you have an understanding of what's in your data. And you're really letting your data speak to you before a review, so you're not kind of coming up with your own hypothesis. You're clearly seeing it. And I'll walk you through kind of how a document map gets built, so you can understand what it's saying to you. And then David will take us in it live, and you can see how it works. But it's very powerful for kind of early on understanding documents, and really kind of you can focus your document sets with regards, and set aside documents that are less important and focus on documents that are based on the key concepts contained in them. So a document mapper works like this. Every dot in document mapper represents a document. And like documents are clustered together based on core concepts. And you can see here we have gas, price, and energy. And these are all different sets of documents that have been grouped. And then they're connected together by shared subconcepts. So if it's between gas and energy, those clusters have shared concepts between the two. And as coding decisions are made, the colors of the dots change to visually represent the coding decisions. You then have the ability to select clusters that are important and those that are not, to set aside documents and focus on the sets that are most important to you. Quite powerful. This process is repeated to create a complete picture of your data. Focus on the key concepts that you're really drilling down on. And you'll see with David how much control you have over it. And this is what it looks like directly in Ringtail. Very powerful tool.
And Jeff, if we could actually tie this back to ACEDS, and I was recently going through, they have a virtual training series that goes in depth into many of these topics. And Mary, maybe perhaps I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember the name of the lawyer who was giving the instruction.
Are you talking about Helen Bergman-Moray?
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody who's watched that series, she'll sort of anecdotally mention her involvement with a technology that was known as a 10X. And to those of us that have been around a while or have watched the evolution of these tools, this document mapper is actually born out of that software named a 10X. And so it actually sort of gets a bit of a mention there in the training. I just thought that was a cute little anecdote to share. A 10X was a product that was acquired by FTI along with Ringtail, and then merged the two platforms together. So she actually mentioned sort of being at the forefront, being part of that team that was working with that product in the early days, as it were, although the early days were really not that long ago.
Not that long ago, but it was.
Yeah, it's also important to note that the inventor and the brains behind Document Mapper and a 10X is actually, I don't know if people have seen this, but he's Skip Walter, and he's back with FTI and Ringtail, kind of coming up with the next evolution of feature set. So it's great to have him here, and really excited with some of the things that he's coming up with. So stay tuned. So
Fantastic.
our next feature is conditional coding. And this is really a tool that I'll say is kind of like putting the bumpers on the bowling alley. It keeps it focused, it increases accuracy, and increases proficiency. But it streamlines the coding process to reduce reviewer fatigue, improves consistency and scalability. And these are really kind of smart, responsive templates that, as decisions are made, the other options change with them, right? So it allows people to kind of push people along down a specific funnel of coding decisions. And we'll see how quickly it can work here, just with kind of a build here. But this is the back end of conditional coding. These are kind of the presets that admins can set for their coding templates. And as the coding templates are created, you can see here, just with a few clicks, how things can quickly optimize and change and be coded. And once a document has been coded, what's great about it is those coding decisions can be saved as a macro. Down here in the bottom, you see some of those images. Those are macros. And if you think there's going to encounter documents that are similar, you can save coding decisions as a macro, and then literally with one click of a mouse for the next document, code a document. So powerful, really efficient, and obviously the accuracy is a big deal here. The last thing I'm going to touch on here before handing it over to David for the live demonstration is native file viewer. And I think most people are familiar with the notion of native file viewing, but just can't be said enough is if you're only working with static images of files, specifically Excel, you're only working with a partial data set. There is so much data contained beneath the surface. You think about cells that have been hidden, being able to unlock those cells and unhide those data, being able to look at formulas and how formulas work in connecting spreadsheets and tabs and things like that is powerful, especially for financial analysis. Very important. Also PowerPoint, being able to look at slide notes and animations. Being really just important to make sure you have all of the information in front of you. So with that said, that brings us to the live demonstration portion of our webinar today, and I'm going to hand it over to David here, who's going to bring us live into Ringtail.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, Deja, Mary, Jeff, how does that look on your side?
It looks good on my side.
Same here.
Good. Okay, great, wonderful. One can never evaluate one's own latency when looking at the screen. Okay, so let's take a look through these 5 features. As Jeff laid out to us, we're going to attempt to address them in the same order. We're going to take a look at how you would review chat, alternative data in Ringtail, take a look at continuous active learning, then the visualization of document mapper, and then we'll put the bumpers on the bowling alley, as Jeff said, and we'll take a look at conditional coding and the native file viewer. So this is just a chance for us to get into the software and look at the features as they were laid out for us and have a little bit of a dialogue and then leave some room for questions. So where am I? For those of you who may not have seen Ringtail recently or may not have seen Ringtail ever, I'm in a browser. It's a browser-based tool, as most of these things are these days. And I entered my username and password, and then I went into a case. So I'm in a case that we cleverly call RT Sandbox, and I'm in the documents area of the program. Now, we're going to start with chat data. So in order for me to do that, let me get you to a sample of this chat data. We'll take a look and see what that looks like. So I'm going to open up this browse panel that I have conveniently hidden here on the side. And I'm going to go into this organization that we have in Ringtail called levels. It's just a way of organizing your data as it's brought in. And let me click on raw, because what I want to take a look at here is that we want to get a sense of what this Bloomberg chat data looks like before anybody has a chance to actually do anything with it. And this has really been some of the challenges and why we created this utility. So this is an example of a chat from a Bloomberg type system. And you could just see, if you can just imagine the soul-crushing fatigue that might settle in if your job was to review this type of data all day, every day, or even for, I don't know if I would make it for the first 3 hours. You see, it's just the plain text view of it is very difficult to work with, but there's also some things that are inherent to it. See, what you actually have is you have a lot of people entering the room. You have people actually posting some messages. You often have disclaimers. So it's difficult to just parse out the actual content. It's also a challenge to figure out who was in the room and speaking and who was in the room and actually had visibility onto this chat. And so it's a very, very challenging format to deal with. So let me go ahead and switch to this other level, and I'll show you what happens once this chat data is brought into Ringtail. And it's actually, this is off-the-shelf functionality now. It's something that we developed for a particular large banking client, or at least in partnership with them and their needs. And then we were able to bring it into the software. So you can actually point Ringtail ingestion feature at some Bloomberg data, and we'll just let the internet catch up with us here. There we go. Okay, there we go. As with all things internet related, we sometimes just have to exercise some patience. So what has happened to that chat data? So you just saw the long spiral of text and disclaimers and entering and exits. And so what Ringtail does is it parses out that data and it creates this legend at the top of it. So this was created this is a fictitious chat that was created off of Bloomberg data. And as I scroll with my mouse along here, we can see all of the players. And so this is everybody who was actively in this room in terms of who entered the room and who exited the room. And so we get a legend right here that shows us all of the various parties that were in this chat room for this period of time, the duration of which is at the top of the screen. We can see how many messages, attachments, and other things that they were involved in. So this gives you a quick snapshot of who was in the room and what their activity was. The color coding between the blue and the light blue is indicative of different organizations. So based on the metadata within this chat, we were able to distinguish between the Crawley family and the Downton staff. And so that way we can, when we're parsing through this, as you see as we get into the chat, it's very clear not only who's speaking, but which organization that they're a part of. See, there's a townsperson here who was in the room and did not speak at all. And so we have all of that data available to us. And so it's summarized the information for us. It's parsed out the various parties. It's created a viewing experience that is legible and intelligible. And it also just helps guide us through this process. Also eliminates all those disclaimers, the entrances and exits, so all of that noise. And so this is a much, much different experience as one is looking through here. Now, if I was interested in a particular party, my last name is Robinson. So when I was preparing for this earlier, I said, well, let's take a look and see what Daisy Robinson is looking at. As you see, I've highlighted her in green. And now as I scroll through this chat, we can see that all of her conversations are highlighted in green as well. So it's a pretty straightforward experience. Now, just to say a little bit on top of that, let me open this coding pane on the right-hand side, because what we want to take a look at some of the metadata. With review of anything, the content is only part of the equation, the other part of it being the metadata. And so we do get all these statistics. We do have the title, we have the chat count, we have the start date, the end date, and the people and the organizations that were involved in those chats. And so all that metadata is available to us. Now, it's available for viewing, but it's also available for searching. So if I wanted to look for any chats, for example, with certain participants, I have all that metadata available to me. And so all of that data is right there. If there are attachments, as there are with this one, you can click into it right there. There's no content because it's a JPEG, so I'll simply click over here from the content view into the image view. And lo and behold, here's that relevant attachment. So I get that in context. I see it as an attachment to the chat itself. But I'm also able to go back to the chat and see all that information. So any other thoughts on that, Jeff, before I move on?
No, that's great. Yeah, really, really good example there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was really a problem that needed to be solved. And then what we did was able to take it from a service offering into something that's native to the software. So I think that's a really great add-on for people who use our technology. Now, let's transition from chat. So that was the alternative data types. And let's take a look at continuous active learning. So I'm going to click on the single menu in Ringtail from the documents area into the analysis area, because this is where a lot of the features and functions in Ringtail that do those high-level analytics are held. We have things, as you can see down the left-hand side, called cubes and Mayans, metadata analysis, clustering, predictive models, which is the theme, I guess, of what we'll be talking about. And that has to do with, actually working with predictive technology. So supervised learning, in essence, and things that are learning from the technology is learning what's, say, a relevant document based on human input. Now, this area that I'm in right now is predictive models. And this is, I think, what most people think of when they think of predictive coding. This is creating a model, training the model through several iterations is done by one or a small group of experts. And then the software is able to auto-code the entire population. So that's one flavor of predictive coding. It can be intimidating to people who are not familiar with it. It could be any of the number of challenges that we enumerated. It does have a place and time. Like say if I was working on something like, say, a second request, something where I needed to really get a firm figure on the number of documents that might be reviewed, the number of reviewers, and the timeline, then I would go through this more formal exercise. However, should I want to just dip my toe in the predictive coding ocean, or lake or puddle or whatever you want to call it, depending on how many documents you have, I'm going to click on populations and samples. And I'm going to work with the continuous active learning. So it's the same sort of thing. Basically, documents are reviewed. In one case, you might have a smaller group of people strategically, but in this case, we might actually just let the review flow. But let me talk a little bit about how we get in here, because I'm in this area called populations and samples. And it's really it's really how all things start, whether you're working with predictive coding or you're working with continuous active learning, even if you're taking random samples just to evaluate your keywords. In Ringtail, you can add a population, which is, as we may or may not know, predictive coding and continuous active learning are based on a sliver of statistics. And so that requires certain things to happen beforehand. Like, for example, you need to identify a population of documents, and then you can move on from there, and you can actually create a randomly generated sample of documents. And so there's lots of different use cases for each one of these. If I wanted to add a population, that's easy enough, and then I could add a sample from that population. So this is a bit of a bit of a side piece, I guess, to this whole discussion. But as you can see, we already have a population created here. We have 500,000 documents we have bundled into what we call a population in Ringtail. Once I click into that population, you'll see predictive coding is listed over here on the left-hand side. Now, we're not in the area of predictive coding, as I had just mentioned. This is not the formal exercise of creating training sets and evaluating the models and then deciding to run the training. We're in the area of continuous active learning, or here, as it said, continually prioritize and train. Let me just talk to you a little bit about what's in front of us. So from the outset of this, we'll come back to what's in front of you in just a moment, but if you want to configure the training, it's really pretty simple. You choose a pick list, and then from that pick list, you tell the software what is considered a positive result and what's considered a negative result. Now, this is going to be different depending on what you're trying to predict or what you're trying to have the software learn. You could be looking for maybe yes, no, or an issue. You could be looking for various relevance calls. You could be looking for privilege calls. But the whole thought process behind this is that if I should check this box, then the software can basically be learning from the active review. So there's no creating of sets. There's no training the model. There's no evaluating the training sets. Essentially, the review can proceed as you would like it to. And then as documents are reviewed, this dashboard will begin to fill out. And so as we go a little bit further down here on the screen, we'll see that you have this whole area here. Basically, this is my pick list. And so as reviewers are reviewing documents, it's cataloging what's considered a positive, negative, or negligible value. And then what's down here in the corner, it's a little bit, it's blocked on my screen, but I think you should be able to see this. There's a blue box here saying that if I click on this, what will happen is Ringtail will return to me the documents that it thinks are most like what I want. I can figure out a different way of saying that. Essentially, the way this works is once I configure the training set through, I think it's about 3 or 4 different clicks there, the software, and then activate it, and what happens is that the software on the schedule that I set, every hour, every 4 hours, every day, can go through and look at the documents that have been reviewed, which we see here, and then it will go out and it will give a continuous active learning score to the remaining population. And so if I click on this blue box right here, then a list of documents will return to me with the documents that are more highly scored at the top in descending order. So whether I use that for an investigation, I can use it for QCing documents that are being reviewed. I can use it for prioritizing documents, perhaps that I've used for search terms. But the whole idea is that this is happening automatically without this formal, rigorous, sort of structured exercise. It allows you to leverage the predictive coding piece of Ringtail without putting in the entire investment. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that, or maybe you can help give us some clarity on what we're looking at?
Yeah. So, well, I think one of the things I'll just at a higher level here is just one of the things you'll notice with Ringtail, especially with predictive coding, is how visual we've made it, and how people are able to really understand what's occurring, what's going on with the use of visualizations. That's something that when we talk about easy to use, specifically with predictive coding, the investments we've made and allowing it to be usable, right, to remove that intimidation factor. So at a high level, David, that's one of the call-outs I like to make, is just the importance of making it easy to use and easy to deploy.
I do appreciate that. And I think, as you say, with visualization, I was starting to look at some of the other elements on the page. Because at its most basic, you configure the training, you click on this box to activate it, and then you can periodically come in here and click on this blue box to get the documents that are more like the ones that you're looking for, whether that's applicable to an issue or a relevancy call or whatnot. There's actually a lot of other information on the page. So it's sort of like, if this is where I want to start and just work in the shallow end of the pool, that's fine. But there's a lot of other visual information on the page as well. This is actually showing me my distribution of documents currently based on what's been coding. Although for anybody who has ever read the little prints, you might think that that's an elephant inside of a boa constrictor. But aside from that, we also have this gray box here, which is for people that are a bit more advanced or a bit more mature in their use of predictive coding. It allows you to take a random sample, see how those are being reviewed, and then evaluate things like precision and recall and confidence level. And so for people who are familiar with those and want to actually add a little bit more rigor to this continuous active learning process, it's available to them too. But I think the value I've always seen in this is the type of thing that you can configure and turn on in the background, and that you can allow the software to leverage predictive coding without committing to it, having to commit to the results of it, or having to invest the time and the resources in making it work. So any other thoughts on that, Jeff, before I move on?
No, I think that's great.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. Okay. Now, the next part that we wanted to do, too, is we want to take a look at the visual analytics in Ringtail. And so in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the documents area where we left off in our chat. And we were in our chat data. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to identify a particular custodian in this case, and then we'll move into the document map or the data visualization so we can help see how it works. So I'm in the search area of Ringtail, and I really just want to look for a custodian. And I want to look for a particular one whose name is Robert Bai. And that is doing what often happens when you're in front of a large group of people. That is, taking longer than it ever has or should have. Let me just go into my history. I actually did the search earlier, and I brought up these documents. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go into my search history and grab these documents rather than letting the internet sabotage me any more than it has already today. Okay. So what I've done is I've actually brought back all of the documents that were collected from Rick Bai. I actually have about 11,000 of them here. And I'll come back to some of these points later. They're actually being delivered to me in an email threaded view, so a ton of value for that. But we're here to talk about the document visualization of Document Mapper. And so in order to do that, so this is a list view. This is 11,000 documents, the first document in front of me. But if I switch my workspaces from this list view, Ringtail can in real time draw a map of these documents. And so what is a map supposed to do? A map is supposed to help you find where you're going and avoid what you don't want to, and help you stay out of where you don't want to go. And so here we are. We're looking at this circle with a bunch of smaller circles in it, and this is the document map. Currently, the setting that I have on is it's showing me 500 documents at a time. That's completely configurable by me. But I do want to point out some things to you right away. The list we had seen before, we see that there's an interesting thread at the top, but then there's a lot of duplicate emails and some other nonsense here. And so like we said, a document map is to help direct you to where you want to go and help you avoid where you don't want to go. And so let me just give you some foundations of what we're looking at. So each one of these circles actually represents a group of documents. As I hover over this large circle, you can see that there are 33 documents here that contain organizer, record, organizer, and table. And I can look at the titles of those, and I can see that those look relatively irrelevant. So that's the point of this. So what Document Mapper does is it groups documents that share 6 or more concepts. A concept is a noun or a phrase. And so when the documents are ingested into Ringtail, they go through an enrichment process. And that enrichment process extrapolates the concepts. Those concepts are stored, and then when I click into the map view, it's able to cluster documents that share 6 or more concepts. And then it draws this document map so that I can find the documents I'm looking for or avoid the ones I don't want to, or perhaps just better organize my review for speed and efficiency. Outside the map is a kind of legend. Essentially, states is a theme that's running through these three clusters of documents. Something about I appointments, something about Scott Josie, and then, of course, all of these do not delete organizer notes. So what I do is I look around the outside of the compass to find themes that are interesting to me. Now, if we compare this to what we were looking at in continuous active learning was a supervised exercise, meaning that it was returning results to me based on how people were coding documents. So how the lawyers are actually coding documents, continuous active learning is going to bring me more documents I'm looking for. And that's great if I've gone through that process or if I have a good understanding of it. But at the outset of a matter or at any point through it, I may not actually have that much information, or I may need to better organize my documents for review. And so the clustering is great, but this visualization also helps me quickly scan the outside of this and determine a place to start. And so earlier today, I was struck by these large clusters that seem to be highly irrelevant material. And by clicking onto that, the documents then open up into the list on the right-hand side. And I can go through it, I can read several of those documents, and then I can collectively say, okay, well, these are not relevant and not privileged. And then we'll see that that entire cluster will change from blue to gray. Now, as I was traversing this, I was curious about BU company, and I was also curious because this cluster has a green sliver in it. And as I move my mouse in closer, I see that the pie chart turns into dots, because each one of those dots actually represents one of the documents that are clustered together. And green, from my coding list, means documents that have already been coded relevant. So it's just a sense that the theme along the outside of the compass drew me to that cluster. The fact that some of the documents had been coded gave me some more information about it. And then when I hovered my mouse onto it, I was able to see, well, these documents are being held together because they refer to something to do with an FBI investigation. And just out of curiosity, I clicked on this to see what these were about. Now, the documents have been presented to me as an email threaded view. And there's a bit about this without going into any great depth, but the visualization here shows me, for example, that these first two emails are essentially duplicates of one another. So I really just need to read one and not both of them. Other indicators on here are whether these emails are inclusive of the prior emails. And then we also have emails here where these were forwarded to someone else. People were added or removed from this. And so what I wanted to do then was open this document. I was leveraging my second monitor. And so I'm opening up the content of this first email. And we can see that this is an email from the legal department at Enron, forwarded to all employees, asking them to cooperate with the FBI investigators. Now, I use this button up here in the right corner to go to the next document in the email thread. And I was able to see a pattern here. I was able to see that Vince Kaminsky took this email that he received and forwarded it to his AOL account, which is something that people did in the early aughts. And then I went to the next document, and I saw, lo and behold, he was not the only person to do that. Jeff Story was also someone who did this. And so just in the essence of like what I learned in this theoretical exercise was I was able to quickly identify some interesting documents related to an FBI investigation based on my knowledge that BU company was a theme or a word that was provocative to me. This email threaded visualization then led me to see that this email message had been forwarded to several other people. So it's just the idea that you can use this in an investigatory context, in a quality control context. And of course, if you're just reviewing documents, it's certainly much faster and more efficient to read documents that are similar to each other than documents that aren't. And then I guess one little thing is, you hadn't noticed, there's a timeline up on the screen which shows the distribution of these documents across time. And if I have a set of documents that are selected, it shows that in the timeline. Now also, I can use this timeline to hone in on a period of time. So if I'm only interested in the documents from 2001, I select them above, and then I'm able to redraw the map specifically just on those documents. And so it's a way of actually working in a way that's interactive. There's a lot of ways to interact with this map and a lot of different layers of information, but it works in the process of simply organizing and presenting to you in a way that's really vibrant and informative. But there's also a lot of opportunities for running searches within your map, or selecting a piece of the timeline and redrawing that map at any time, or resetting it to seeing the entire map at once. Any other thoughts on that, Jeff, before we move on?
No, I think that was a really, really clear demonstration of document mapper.
Good, thanks. I think the thing that we always strive and endeavor to do when we show this to people and is just to try to communicate it as succinctly as possible, because out of all of the things in the program, all the visualizations and the things that we've seen throughout, they're all born out of this document map. It's sort of the ethos that runs through it, which is getting things, using analytics to actually get you what you want and presenting it to you in a way that you can navigate it. And that can seem a little strange at first for some people, but trust me, once you've tried it, you never want to go back. Okay, now let's go ahead, and I'm going to reset this map to everything before we go on. And then I want to go and I'm going to cover just a couple of other quick topics. So let me go ahead and click back into the list view here. Okay, and here's where we left off. Okay, now the reason I'm moving back in here is just to show you that it is actually pretty simple for you to toggle back and forth from the map back into the list. You just click in and out of a workspace, and then you're able to go into one or the other. And so this is, because sometimes you want to work in a list based on the type of work you're doing, and sometimes the map is more informative. So just a couple of quick things here. One is, let me just talk about the native viewer, go a little bit out of order. So there, as I'm looking through this list, I can see that there is an Excel file. And so what we see here is a simple rendering of that Excel file, and that's good, and that may be good enough. But however, if there was some level of, if I needed to really dig deeper into this, if we're doing some sort of forensic exercise or we have those types of people in front of this, I may need to get a better, more realistic view of it, whether it be PowerPoint so that I can appreciate how it's presented, see speaker notes. Maybe I want to look at the Word document to look at formatting or hidden content. So we looked earlier that I could switch into the image view. That's how I would look at this if I was looking at a PDF or a JPEG or a TIFF file. But if I click on native view, then what we see is I'm going into actually a pretty true rendering of this. And so we take a look at this, and this is a pretty accurate representation of it. And I'll just go through this quickly. There was a lot of R&D, I guess, time and attention and research into the different options. And we looked across the playing field of e-discovery tools, and we saw that people were using a lot of the same near-native viewers. And the people who do this type of work for us said, well, I'm dissatisfied for two reasons. I think the fidelity of, say, an Excel spreadsheet is not great. A lot of times it doesn't look like an Excel spreadsheet. It looks like a PDF of an Excel spreadsheet. What I want is someone, when I'm in these products, to see something that looks and feels like the original file. And the other one is speed. In testing some of these, you could see from going to document that it could take upwards of a minute to move from file to file. And as we know, time is, anything that slows down the process of the review could actually have a lot of cost to our clients, which they may not be accepting of, or it may actually help us miss our deadline. So what we've done is we've actually employed the Microsoft Office viewer. And so what we found is that covers the majority of the file types, and there are ways of working around that if you're dealing with some other type of specialty file. But generally, it's going to cover most of what you need, and you're going to get better fidelity, and you're going to get better speed. And so it's not the well-worn path, but sometimes you need to take a different path, even on something as basic and rudimentary as native file viewing. Okay, I'm going to finish this up with conditional coding. Any other thoughts on that, Jeff, before I move on?
No, it's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, let me go ahead and open up this pane here on the right-hand side. So what is conditional coding? Well, what it is it's a type of coding form that helps guide the reviewer through the process. Let me explain. So if I had read this Excel spreadsheet and I had said, it's actually not relevant and not privileged related to this particular matter, I click on the not relevant option, and you'll see that the rest of the form grays out, and I get this super affirmation telling me your coding is complete. I can go on to the next document. That's one way in which it works. It's actually pretty easy to set up, and the form is pretty vibrant. Let me show you what happens if I say, for example, that this document is relevant. Okay, now I see that because it's relevant and not privileged, it's indicating to me that I don't have to give a privilege designation, but I do need to give an issue that pertains to its relevance, and I also need to still make a confidentiality call. And the coding is complete, and I can move on. Or I can choose relevant and privileged, and then you'll see that it's actually informing me that I need to fill out the entirety of this form, but then I can move forward. And so I was really tickled by your metaphor earlier, or your analogy earlier, Jeff, that this is putting bumpers on the bowling alley. As someone who's not a very good bowler, I do appreciate this. But really, what you want to think about is if you're sitting down and reviewing documents, you want something that facilitates speed and accuracy. And part of that is keeping the person who is sitting in that chair engaged in the work that they're doing. Going through emails day after day, hour after hour, it's easy for people to get distracted, start thinking about lunch, start counting down the minutes to the end of the day. We're all human, even the most diligent of us. And so if there's anything that we could put into the software, whether it be color coding the documents, putting them in a map, popping out the search terms that I want for people in the certain view, or creating a coding form like this, that's essentially grabbing my hand and guiding me through the process of coding each document. So as I select the first option, it says, okay, hey, David, you need to fill out the third, the second, the fourth, or you're done. The coding is complete. You can move on. The last tidbit on this would be these icons down here. What these are macros, a word that I hadn't heard since the 1990s, but it's welcoming back because what it can do is that I, as a reviewer or a lawyer, can sit here in my seat and I can take all of these coding decisions that I've made and I can assign them to a button. I choose one of these nifty little icons here, and that icon then appears at the bottom of the page. As I go to the next document, if I'm doing a lot of repetitive coding or coding combinations, then I can actually just simply click on some of these to say, okay, well, I'm going to click here, and it automatically applies all of those determinations for me. And then I can move from there on to the next document. You see? It actually coded all three of those options for me. And so that's definitely an accelerator and a time saver right there. I think that's all that we had to show you today. So we took a look at the chat data. We took a look at continuous active learning, document mapper, the native file viewer, and conditional coding. It certainly feels like a nice dense little session, but a great introduction into the essentials of what we're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dave. That was awesome. Awesome to see the features up close and personal, and I hope everybody was able to kind of take kind of the basic concepts that I showed and then be able to kind of see them build and live and in action with David's live demonstration to help you follow along as things went a little faster. So a couple of things. Just want to say that if anybody has interest in really kind of a deeper dive in understanding specifically what Ringtail can do for your organization, please feel free to reach out at info@ringtail.com. You can visit our website at www.ringtail.com, and we'll also be following up after the webinar just with some additional materials for you to review on your own time. So that said, I think we, to the extent there are questions, feel free to ask, and we'll use our couple of minutes left here to answer a few. And to the ones that we can't get to, we'll make sure to follow up offline.
Oh, fantastic, Jeff and David. It's always interesting to do a demo over a webcast that's sucking up some bandwidth at the same time as you're pulling data over the internet. So you are both brave people. I have to say the platform has come quite a ways from when I saw it. The chat feature in particular with the summaries and the visual representation is very, very nice. We have a question about whether that chat feature can work with other chat platforms.
Yeah, sure. So, David, I'll just touch on it. The generic answer to that is yes. David, do you want to go further?
I know. Well, we want to give some context to that because I think when people in sales and marketing say yes to you, you want us to substantiate that. So the tool is designed for Bluebird Chat in mind. There's other chat data that it currently works with, and our R&D department is currently investigating some of the most commonly used so that we can ingest those. So if you actually have a particular chat data in mind, please contact us. We can most likely accommodate you in some form or fashion of Ringtail.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic! And your mapping feature, is it possible to code directly in there? To apply coding to a cluster?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you can do is you can click on a cluster and you can apply bulk coding to every single item in there, or you can select just several of the documents in there.
Okay, and then we have another question about the macros. Is there a limit, or how many macros can be stored for the conditional coding?
I want to say 10. I mean, it's not what I want to say. That's actually what the answer is.
That's a better answer, I think. Yeah, that's good. That is good.
It's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's not an alternative fact.
All right. All right. Well, we're right at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. There are a substantial number of questions we didn't get to, so I'm going to ask you two gentlemen if you'll address them after the webinar. And I want to thank the two of you, Jeff and David, for a fantastic introduction to the new and improved Ringtail. Oh my goodness! And I thank all of our attendees for coming on, and thank you to FTI, our affiliate, for not only for sponsoring this session and supporting ACEDS, but also supporting the technical competence of our community. We all need to learn about the benefits and limits of the technology that's out there, and this is a way for our community to do that. And thank you for stepping up. So we'll see you all on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.